The United Nations definition of trafficking in persons is the recruitment, transportation, transfer, harboring, or receipt of persons by means of the threat or use of force or other forms of coercion, of abduction, of fraud, of deception, of the abuse of power, or of a position of vulnerability, or of the giving or receiving of payments or benefits to achieve the consent of a person having control over another person, for the purpose of exploitation. Exploitation shall include, at a minimum, the exploitation of the prostitution of others or other forms of sexual exploitation, forced labor or services, slavery or practices similar to slavery, servitude or the removal of organs. An estimated 100 to 500,000 persons are trafficked annually into Europe. The systematic collection of data on gender violence before and during trafficking shows that before they were trafficked, more than 1/3 report being subjected to multiple forms, almost half were sexually abused or raped, 1/3 were sexually abused as children, 2/3 experienced physical assault, and almost half experienced domestic violence, primarily as children living with it. A range of traumatic symptoms have also been documented, with almost all reporting mental distress. Men are involved due to the Western European industry are now dependent on migrant labor, both legal and illegal, especially agricultural in the UK, France, Spain, Switzerland, and the Netherlands. Women are sold on sex markets that increase the demand for trafficked women. Children have parents that have sought employment elsewhere, making them vulnerable to neglect and mistreatment by the adults in whose care they are left, especially when parents do not or cannot remit money for their upkeep. The scale of money made from these activities is hard to gauge, but one estimate of money laundering is between 500 billion to $1 trillion annually. The lengthier and more expensive the journey, the greater the indebtedness and dependency of the migrants, which in turn creates higher levels of vulnerability to exploitation. The United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees is primarily concerned with two categories of trafficking victims: refugees and other persons of concern, to the UNHCR who may fall prey to traffickers looking to take advantage of their vulnerability and people who have been trafficked. UNHCR's efforts to combat trafficking in Europe are often implemented in cooperation with national governments and other intergovernmental organizations and NGOs. One of the main response actions is establishing safe houses and shelters located either in the countries of transit or destination where victims can be placed following their interception. Shelters also exist in the countries of origin in order to receive return victims. Thailand is one of the most notorious sex tourism industries in the world, beginning in the 19th century. It is a regional hub for illegal trafficking of women and children. Most are forced into prostitution. Victims are lured to and from this country to be sold as slaves. Lack of citizenship is the single greatest risk factor in Thailand. Filial piety is the obligation to financially support parents and family members, and is a very common method of entry into trafficking. Religion is also used to justify exploitation. 50 to 70% of girls interviewed were HIV positive. The pimps, brothel owners, and recruiters are rarely prosecuted and benefit disproportionately from the wealth generated. The United States is one of the top 3 worldwide largest areas for human sex trafficking. At least 50,000 women and children are forced into the sex slavery yearly. The most common age for young girls is between 12 to 14 years. 70% of children are trafficked for work in the sex trade, and 45 states have already passed anti-trafficking legislation. Most often, victims of sex trafficking do not speak out due to being brainwashed by their pimp or trafficker. Using fear in the victim will scare them into not leaving them or telling authorities. Even after a victim finds a way out of the industry, they still fear any harm coming to them or to their family if they come forward to speak about their past experiences.